Thank you very much for being with us. It's like back to the old days when you were Secretary of State here in the studio. How are you finding it all?
Well, I'm not wearing a tie now, so there's a bit of change. Look, from a personal point of view, it is very nice to have more time for my family, be a better dad, hopefully a better husband. But I can't say there's not a little bit of me that isn't missing the action, particularly when you look at what President Trump is doing. I mean, this is a huge time in global affairs, and so there is an element of frustration at being on the sidelines, but that's democracy.
It's interesting. You say there that it's such a period of change, which it clearly is, that, you know, the first 100 days of Trump, I feel that everyone knew it was going to be big, but perhaps not quite how big. How do you think he's done?
Well, he's done a lot of things with which I profoundly disagree. I don't agree, for example, with his approach on Ukraine and his view of President Zelensky. I don't agree with what he's done on tariffs. What I have to say, perhaps grudgingly, I respect, is that he is a politician who wants to change things. And he had a mandate, and he said, I'm not going to accept the status quo. I'm going to make big changes. And lots of us were saying before he took office, well, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of bluster, and actually he'll be more moderate in office. And he said no. And he is saying to his base, and if you look at, he's had a small decline in support, but a lot of his base has remained totally loyal because they see someone who is prepared to rip up the status quo. And the choice for us now is whether we actively try to manage that or whether we just stand on the sidelines.
What do you think the right answer to that is?
Absolutely get stuck in. I mean, you know, free trade, it hasn't been perfect. We have not been good at spreading the benefits of free trade to all parts of the countries. We know that in this country. But it has been a massive force for prosperity. When I was born, half the world was in extreme poverty. Now it's less than 10%.
So I guess I'm interested, what does getting stuck in mean? Because if you look at Canada, for example, you know, we just see Mark Carney win the election there, really off the back of sticking up for Canada against Donald Trump, for speaking his mind, for playing hardball. Is that the approach we should take?
Every country has to take a different approach. I don't think that this is about sound bites, although in the context of an election campaign, I understand why politicians have to do what they have to do, and I've done a fair amount of it myself over the years. But
well, you haven't said things you've always meant, or...
No, but you have to... There's a certain extent to which you campaign in slogans, and I understand that. But let's take trade. America is 26% of global GDP, but countries that broadly believe in free trade, the UK, Canada, Australia, Japan, Korea, the EU countries, they are 31% of GDP. So, you know, we can make sure that at least between ourselves, we continue to have free and open trade, even if America goes a different route. And we need to be out there building alliances with countries like Japan, for example, like Australia, like Canada, and saying, look, whatever else happens, we are going to continue to have free and open trade because it is a massive engine for prosperity.
I noticed you're not talking there about the European Union, and there has been talk about the UK doing some kind of deal with the EU, perhaps matching them on agriculture standards, etc., etc. Is that the right move, or are you worried that if we do that, it could make free trade with us as others, including with the US, more difficult?
Well, there are some trade-offs in politics, and in this case, I mean, I'm a believer in free trade, but the EU has said very consistently that the price for fully free trade between the UK and the EU would mean we'd have to accept freedom of movement, and we have not cracked, not this government, not the government of which I was a part, have not cracked the problem of illegal migration and indeed migration levels that are too high. So I just don't think it's a goer if the EU continue to say...
But it doesn't have to be a full free trade deal. That it seems like some kind of, agreement between the two is imminent, right?
Yes, and let's look at what that is. But broadly speaking, something that breaks down barriers is a positive thing. But it's not just with the EU, it's with all sorts of other countries that we could have better trade deals with. And I think right now the democracies that believe in free trade need to stand up and say, well, we are going to continue to trade freely because we know it has made a massive difference to the prosperity of our countries.
Now, I know this is a bit of an impossible question to answer, but you are someone who's been so close to the heart of government and international affairs as Foreign Secretary for so long. You've probably got a better sense of this than most of us. Do you think a UK-US trade deal is going to happen?
Well, it might, for perhaps the strangest of reasons, which is that, as far as the US is concerned, the UK is, responsible in terms of our trade with the US for 1 or 2% of US GDP. It's a very small amount. But because I think Trump has had to backtrack on his original tariff plans, he's now very keen to be seen to do a few deals with a few countries quickly. And the UK is one of the easiest countries for the US to do a deal with. We don't have a trade deficit with the US. And so the big thing that was stopping a trade deal when I was Foreign Secretary was that Trump, in his first administration, was saying he wanted us to change our food standards to allow, exports of chlorinated chicken and things like that. And it looks to me like that may no longer be a requirement because Trump is keen to get a deal, not least because it will put pressure on the EU. So I think we may get a trade deal with the US. I hope, and I think this is the thing that is going to be the biggest determinant as to whether it's a good deal or not. I hope we get rid of these 10% baseline tariffs that Trump has been talking about. I fear we won't. So it may not be a particularly good trade deal, but I think we may get something, and I hope we do.
We are talking, of course, in the week of local elections. I think almost undoubtedly it's going to be a difficult night for the Conservatives. You're defending seats from 2021, you're defending the most seats. Almost inevitably, there will be pressure on Kemi Badenoch afterwards. How do you think your party should respond to that pressure?
I think we've just got to be very sensible and say that being leader of the opposition a year after your biggest ever election defeat, as we had last year, is an impossible job for anyone. I don't think anyone would have done better than Kemi. The electorate are still not willing to give us a hearing because, we were in power for 14 years and they decided they wanted a change. And so, it'd be the worst possible thing to have any kind of speculation about a change in leadership.
Are some of your colleagues a bit excitable then, you think?
Well, it's always nerve-wracking if you're losing local council seats in your patch. But in the end, British people are very smart and they can see that Kemi wants to listen. She wants to understand why it is that we were rejected on such a scale. And there is a process that we have to go through before we'll get a hearing again. So I think we will have a very difficult day.
I guess the problem is that you're in a different position than normal because you've got reform snapping at your heels, I was going to say, but actually, the latest poll has them out in front. And there has been some suggestions about deals, pacts, and Houcham, for example, talking about some kind of coalition even. What's your take on how the Conservatives should approach reform?
Well, I think it's quite straightforward. All political parties are coalitions of voters, but our coalition of voters is very different to Reform and their coalition. There are lots of people who vote Reform who would never, ever vote Conservative. They did in 2019, but it was very exceptional because the Brexit deal had not been done and they wanted Brexit, but they lent us their vote. They won't come back. And we've got to concentrate on our own coalition, which is, aspirational people in their 30s, 40s and 50s with Conservative values who want a strong economy, who want a government that is not going to kill business as this government has been doing. And that is the way that you succeed in politics.
I'm particularly interested, I guess, in your perspective because you had that very, very hard-fought battle in your own constituency with the Lib Dems. Do you worry that by chasing Reform voters, you're ignoring the many voters who you bled to the Lib Dems at the last election?
I think that it's the wrong way of looking at it to say that, we need to take this party's voters. I think you need to decide.
You said, maybe a better way is because you've spoken before about parties winning from the centre ground. Is that where your head is at?
Well, we we will only win if we win back people who've left to Reform and people who've left to the Lib Dems.
Good luck with that.
And people who've left to Labour.
That?
Well,
you have to pick one, don't you?
No, I think you pick a set of values. And the values that we stand for as a Conservative Party are people who want to work hard, do well, want a strong economy, want well-funded public services, and I think they can see that they're not getting that from Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, and we need to get ourselves into a place when the next time they have a choice, they think, actually, I think these guys understand why we kicked them out before, we'll give them another shot.
There's just one other thing that I did want to ask you about. Now, you've spoken about spending more time with your kids, for example, now that you're retreated from the very front line of politics, you're still in the front line of politics, of course. And there's been a lot of talk about misogyny, about content online that young people are consuming. How worried are you about this?
I am worried. I think it's important to say that we have made progress and it is harder, for example, for kids to access porn than it used to be. And I recognise that, you know, we're in a better place than we were. But the thing that worries me most, my kids are 10, 13 and 14. And what worries me is the addictiveness of... They're not on social media. We don't let them have social media accounts. But, you know, they go onto TikTok or YouTube Shorts and, you know, we can lose them for 2 hours. They're just tuned out. And that worries me. And so I can't believe that we're in a world where we actually think it's a good thing if we sit down and watch a movie together on TV. When I was growing up, actually, a TV evening was a bad thing. And, you know, my parents wanted us to play Monopoly or something that I thought was incredibly boring. Now, you know, and so that's what worries me. And
Is it the attention span thing? Because I relate to this a lot, actually, with what you're saying. Do you think we're kind of eroding people's attention span?
It's their attention span, and I suppose, and I'm probably going to anyone young who's watching, I'm going to sound like a real fuddy-duddy, but I worry about people's ability to form relationships with other human beings. Because I think, actually, to form a friendship, it needs to be face-to-face. You need to spend time with people. You need to have the patience to hear people out. And I do worry that social media is making that much harder. So, I mean, to cut to the chase, you know, I would support moves to ban social media for the under-16s.
Would you? So you think that a ban on social media for under-16s?
Yeah, I know it's been talked about in other countries. Personally, I would support that as a dad.
Yeah. Is it something that you might try and push for in Parliament? I know there's been certain talk about it, hasn't there? But then it got watered down, didn't quite make it to a vote. Well,
if there was a vote on it, I would definitely support it because I think it's a no-brainer. I support schools not having mobile phones, people not even being allowed to bring them into the school grounds. I think all those things, you know, in a few years' time, we'll look back and say, you know, why didn't we do that earlier?
One last thing I've got to ask you. I don't know if you've been following the kneecap story. Do you think they should be banned from Glastonbury?
Personally, yes. I just think that Glastonbury should do the right thing. You know, whether I would legislate to stop Glastonbury doing, I don't know. But it just seems to me if you've got a group of people advocating the killing of MPs, that is just beyond the pale.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.